Well, good morning. My name is Rocky Moretti. I'm the Director of Policy and Research with TRIP, a national transportation research nonprofit located in Washington, D.C. TRIP is supported by a coalition of transportation organizations who support TRIP to put out the latest information on the condition and the performance of the nation's transportation system. Today's webinar, I'll initially go ahead and provide information from TRIP's new report, and then we'll also hear from Nick Jarmusch, who's the Midwest Director of Public Affairs for AAA, and then we'll hear from Tracy Johnson, who's the president of the Transportation Development Association here in Wisconsin, and also the president and CEO of the Commercial Association of Realtors, Wisconsin. Following the remarks, we'll have a question and answer period, and my colleague Carolyn Kelly, who's on the call, will watch for either your written questions or your raised hand function. And at that point, you can be elevated to a member of the panel so that you can interact and ask questions or follow-up questions of any of the panelists. The report itself, Keeping Wisconsin Mobile, in addition to looking at the current condition and also traffic safety and traffic congestion levels of the state's transportation system, includes breakdowns for data for the state's largest urban areas. During my comments, I'll provide individual comments for the Milwaukee and Madison area, but in the question and answer period, I can also be happy to provide information for the Eau Claire, Green Bay, Kenosha, and Wausau areas as well. Since TRIP was founded in 1971, we've released over 600 reports. The current report, Keeping Wisconsin Mobile, is based on the latest data from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, the U.S. Department of Transportation, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Board. Our primary findings are, with Wisconsin continuing to grow and vehicle travel in Wisconsin now back to pre-pandemic levels, the state faces a significant challenge in continuing to improve the condition and also reliability and safety of the state's transportation system. Recognizing this challenge, the Wisconsin legislature and Governor Evers have approved additional funding, which has been helpful in moving forward critical projects, also increasing funding for local governments for roads and bridges. And this has been complemented in 2021 by the federal approval of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment Act. This, again, has been very helpful and have allowed a lot of significant projects to move forward, not only supporting additional work at the state and local level in terms of improving and repairing roads and bridges, but also moving forward with critical infrastructure projects, adding capacity to portions of highways 18, 15, 23, and 50, as well as Interstate 94, and also improvements to the Zoo interchange. But the TRIP report also found that long-term funding sustainability, or the ability to fund these needed projects, are being impacted by a significant increase in highway construction inflation over the last several years, as well as we move to different types of energy sources for our vehicles, as we move to hybrid and electric vehicles. That is going to have an impact on our ability to collect motor fuel taxes, which, for example, at the federal level, is the primary source of funding for roads and bridges, at least federal funding, across in Wisconsin, across the country. So those are long-term funding challenges that the state faces. The ability of Wisconsin to move forward with needed projects will have a significant impact on the reliability and safety, and also the overall condition of the system. The TRIP report finds that currently the cost to Wisconsin motorists of roads that are congested, in rough condition, and lacking some of the roadway safety features that are necessary is $7.6 billion annually. TRIP reports that the average motorist in the Madison area is losing $2,101 annually in the cost of traffic congestion due to additional delays, the cost of driving on rough roads, and the cost or the economic cost of serious and fatal traffic crashes in which there was a lack of adequate roadway safety features. The TRIP report finds that the average Milwaukee area motorist loses $2,473 annually in the cost of delays due to traffic congestion, the impact of driving on rough roads, and economic losses due to serious and fatal traffic crashes where there was a lack of adequate roadway safety features. The trip report notes that since 2000 in Wisconsin, the population has increased by 10%. And through 2019, we saw a 16% increase in vehicle travel in Wisconsin. We saw, not surprisingly, during the pandemic, initially a significant drop in vehicle travel in Wisconsin. But by 2022, vehicle travel in the state was back to within 3% of pre-pandemic levels. And during the first 6 months of 2023, vehicle travel has increased 2% from the same period in 2019. So essentially, we now see vehicle travel in Wisconsin back to pre-pandemic levels. The impact of that is that traffic congestion, particularly in the evenings, is back to pre-pandemic levels. The report notes that in the Madison area, that TRIP estimates that the average motorist is spending an additional 41 hours annually stuck in traffic and wasting an additional 18 gallons of fuel due to traffic congestion. In the Milwaukee area, TRIP estimates that the average commuter spending an additional 46 hours annually stuck in traffic and wasting 22 additional gallons of fuel due to traffic congestion. The report also includes a list of the state's most congested portions of highways across the state, and this includes portions of 41, 34, and 94. The report also notes that the Wisconsin Department of Transportation maintains the state's most heavily traveled roads. This includes the state's interstate highways. And based on analysis of pavement conditions on the state-maintained system, 15% of state-maintained roads are rated in poor condition and 14% are rated in fair condition. But based on an evaluation by the Federal Highway Administration of both locally and state-maintained roads, looking strictly at the roughness of the surface of those roads, 25% of major roadways in Wisconsin are rated in poor condition and 20% are rated in mediocre condition. In the Madison area, the TRIP report finds that 45% of major roads are rated in poor condition and 29% are rated in mediocre condition. In the Milwaukee area, the TRIP report finds that 50% of major roadways are rated in poor condition and 24% are rated in mediocre condition. The TRIP report also looked at the condition of Wisconsin's bridges. The bridges across Wisconsin are inspected at least every 2 years. And if a state inspector finds that a bridge, whether it's locally or state maintained, is in any danger of failure, that bridge would be closed or at the very least restricted to lighter weight vehicles. The challenge with bridges is reducing the number of bridges in poor condition and recognizing as the system ages, bridges, the cost of those repairs escalates, and at some point older bridges will need to be replaced or reconstructed. The TRIP report found that 7% of bridges in Wisconsin are rated in poor condition and 42% are rated in fair condition. The report found that in the Madison area, 8% of the region's bridges are rated in poor condition and 41% are rated in fair condition. In Milwaukee, the report finds that 5% of the region's bridges are rated in poor condition and 52% are rated in fair condition. The report also looked at traffic safety. We've seen a significant challenge across the country as we've seen traffic fatalities in the last few years, which were already at a level that's unacceptable, actually increase. In Wisconsin, from 2019 to 2022, the number of people killed in traffic crashes across the state increased from 566 to 602. The report also looked at traffic fatalities, not just for motorists, but also for pedestrian and bicyclists. The report found that from 2017 to 2021, 10% of people killed in Wisconsin in traffic crashes were either pedestrians or bicyclists. The report found that from 2017 to 2021, an average of 35 people were killed annually in traffic crashes in the Madison area. The report found from 2017 to 2021, an average of 83 people were killed annually in the Milwaukee area in traffic crashes. It's estimated that roadway safety features are a contributing factor, not the cause, but contribute to serious and fatal traffic crashes. And last year, the U.S. Department of Transportation came up with a comprehensive strategy to improve roadway safety for motorists, bicyclists, and pedestrians. that included a comprehensive approach that would improve the safety of drivers in terms of driver behavior, would improve the safety of vehicles, but would also improve overall roadway safety and also improve post-care crash. We need to see a significant reduction. The goal really is 0 traffic fatalities, and to do that will require really a comprehensive approach to traffic safety, but certainly that is relying on adequate funding to make the roadway safety improvements that are necessary. The report also points out that the state's economy is riding on its transportation system with $603 billion of goods shipped annually in the state to or from the state. And that figure, in terms of the value in inflation-adjusted dollars, anticipated to increase by 57% by 2045. I'd mentioned that traffic fatalities, I'd mentioned that addressing these needs are impacted by the significant inflation in highway construction costs. In 2022, the Federal Highway Administration estimates that the impact of inflation was 27% in 1 year. We did see this start to tail off a bit towards the end of the year, but unfortunately, it has taken a significant bite out of the additional funding that's available for transportation. So in conclusion, before we hear from the other speakers, the state's future transportation challenges will require that state and local governments have the resources necessary to make the improvements that Wisconsins need to have a system that keeps them safe, that provides reliable mobility on a system that's maintained in good shape. We'll now hear from Nick and then Tracy. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rocky. TRIP's report does a great job of really laying out how poorly maintained roadways can act as a hidden tax for motorists who rely on them. And that burden compounds the cost of vehicle ownership that has already dramatically risen in recent years for a number of reasons. But beyond that financial burden, AAA is also really concerned about the safety impact for roadway users themselves, for the emergency responders who assist them when their vehicles are damaged or involved in a crash, and of road maintenance crews. We know that when someone hits a pothole or their suspension is damaged and they need to pull off on the side of the road, it's a very dangerous place for them to be. Nationally, over 350 people are killed a year while attending to a disabled vehicle on the roadside. And on average, a tow truck driver is killed every other week in the US while assisting vehicles that are on the roadside. And delaying necessary rebuilds of aging roadways also increases the need for crews to do spot maintenance and pavement repairs, during which they often have fewer protections than they would if they were on a major scheduled road work in a road work zone. And as Rocky mentioned, infrastructure funding is a key part of the US DOT's Safe System approach, which we endorse and support, which aims to eliminate roadway fatalities by, in part, implementing new roadway designs and safety features that discourage speeding and reduce crashes and minimize the kinetic energy that's released when crashes do occur. So we encourage motorists to remain alert and slow down and move over for disabled vehicles, emergency responders, maintenance crews. But we also encourage policymakers at the state and federal level to make the necessary investments to improve the safety and efficiency of our road network.
Tracy?
Great, thank you. This is a great report that TRIP put out. It was very illustrative of Wisconsin's opportunity really to further the sustainable infrastructure enhancements, promising those roadways that will instill confidence for not just consumers to drive safely on the roads, but for commercial investors who would be looking to build their facilities near and around to transport their goods, our Wisconsin roadways. So really, Rocky had mentioned that this infrastructure investment is really the cornerstone for sustainability for our region. And we've done such a great job so far, but we can't take our eye off of the prize here. We need to continue to invest in infrastructure, not only for the transport of people to their jobs with those pre-pandemic travel rates back to normal, but also for the transport of goods. And at the end of the day, time is also money, and not only safety, but time is money. So not only are we wasting valuable worker hours who are delayed in traffic, but for all those $603 billion of goods that traverse the roadways, for every minute they're sitting in construction and sitting in delays and sitting in poor road conditions, that is another cost that will be passed on to the consumer. So it remains important that we prioritize that funding, and we continue to look at all angles of this issue. And again, the TRIP report does such a great job of, demonstrating the opportunity that we have in all facets of infrastructure investment.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm going to now ask Carolyn again to explain how we'll proceed in terms of question and answers.
Sure. Thanks, Rocky, and thanks, Nick and Tracy. I'm Carolyn Kelly. I'm TRIP's Director of Communications. So we'll right now have an opportunity for a Q&A with Rocky, Nick, and Tracy. So if there are reporters who've got questions that they'd like to address to any of the speakers, you can either use the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen on Zoom, or you can submit that question to the chat box and I'll be able to read them. If you would like, I can elevate you to a panelist, and so we'll be able to see and hear you, and you can ask your question live of the speakers. So while we wait just a moment for some questions to come in or for some hands to go up, I'll just note that the full report that we're releasing today is now up on TRIP's website. You can find that at TRIPNet, so that's TRIPNET.org. We've also got news releases for each of the areas that are covered in the report, and we'll also have a recording of this news conference up there probably by around 11 o'clock this morning. So you'll be able to find all of the materials there, and then throughout the day, Rocky and I are both also available for any follow-up questions that you might have. I don't see any questions that have come in yet or any hands raised. Oh, actually, so Rocky, if there's anything else that you wanted to add, or Nick or Tracy, anything else that you wanted
I
to
see, like where it says question and answers, that it says there's two.
Oh,
I don't know.
I do see.
Yeah.
I see a question from Jake Force. Jake, I will elevate you to a panelist, and you should be able to ask your question in just a minute. All right, Jake, if you unmute your microphone, you'll be able to ask your question.
Thank you guys for having us on. Can you hear me? Okay, yeah, there.
Yeah, that looks good.
I am with Newswatch 12 in Rhinelander, and I guess what I would ask, and any of you can answer this, is what I covered a story in Anago about the roads fixing one of their main drags of like their downtown. It had been torn up forever, and between getting permits and getting funding and just all of the steps it takes to repair roads and just make them easy, better to drive on for people. I guess, like, what are some strategies that can be employed to maybe clear out some of the red tapes and hurdles and, kind of get to actually being able to fix the roads?
Well, certainly, and I don't know the specifics of that project. That has been certainly at the federal level an ongoing concern. Certainly projects need to get appropriate review, including environmental reviews. But really the challenge is to make those reviews as efficient as possible and as timely as possible, so that it doesn't turn into needless delays. Again, it's not to remove the need and the necessity to evaluate projects on their merit and any potential impacts. It again is to try to expedite that. The other challenge obviously is one of funding. And again, I'm not, this specific project, I'm not sure between local and state governments who had that responsibility. But certainly, we see doing these reports across the country, the challenge that transportation agencies have is having far more requests for improvements than funding. And so they obviously start to triage those projects, again, to evaluate them based on essentially their cost and benefit. But again, that is a function of a lack of adequate resources.
All right, next question comes from Nick Robinson. Nick, I've just made you a panelist, so you should be able to ask your question live in just a moment. Just go ahead and unmute your line, and then you can go ahead with your question.
All righty. Thank you, everybody. Hi, my name is Nick Robinson. I am with News 9 WAOW in Wausau, Wisconsin. And I had seen that part of the report said that it's about $1,200 extra for drivers in Wausau. I had a couple questions. One, what went into, like, what makes up that figure?
Sure.
How did you guys come to that dollar figure? And two, I had done a story similar to Jake where there was a gentleman who was complaining about the road conditions outside of his house. But when I spoke to the city about it, they said that that was a state road and that they would not be able to get around to it until 2029. So is there a way that roads could be fixed quicker, or is there just such a backup that communities are just going to have to be patient?
Well, certainly, ultimately, the transportation agencies are in the best position to explain, in terms of any delays that are going to come in terms of when they can provide that improvement. The other challenge that transportation agencies face is the dilemma between short-term and long-term repairs. And oftentimes transportation agencies, due to a lack of funding, have to essentially look at a fix-it-first approach. They don't have enough funding, so they just try to patch things up as best they can. But as you would anticipate, that's really not the best long-term strategy. And if transportation agencies have adequate resources, then they can do long-term repairs, more costly initially, but they last longer. And so that's some of the challenges. If you don't mind, I'll just quickly give some of the key numbers in Wausau just for your report and kind of explain them a bit. The report finds that in the Wausau area, the average motorist is spending an additional $1,243 in the cost of driving on rougher roads, which is beating up their vehicles, lost time due to traffic congestion, and the economic cost of traffic crashes, in which the lack of adequate roadway safety factors were a contributing factor. The report found that in the Wausau area, 16% of major roads have pavements in poor condition and 25% are rated in mediocre condition. The report also found that in the Wausau area, annually over the last 5 years, there were 13 people killed in traffic crashes.
All right, we have another question from WBAY News. I'm adding them as a panelist now, so you should be able to hear them in just a moment. So if you unmute your line, you'll be able to ask your question.
Perfect. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All
Yep.
right. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you for taking my question. I had typed it out, wasn't quite sure if we could see it, but I had another question. I'm not sure if anyone is able to lend a little bit more information to this, but we're in the area where Highway 41, crosses into a lot of larger communities in our viewing area, and congestion is a real issue. We also have a lot of different construction projects. A South Bridge is being added in Green Bay. That's supposed to be done in like 7 years. And now there's talk about, and it seems like it's the most promising that it's been in the last couple of years, about Amtrak coming to the Fox Valley, Greater Green Bay area. And I think a lot of people are talking about how that could also help congestion. I know that you guys are talking a lot about, funding being the big issue, but are there other, other tactics or strategies that are in the works or that are being done to help with the congestion issues on Wisconsin roadways?
Well, that's a great set of questions. And we've got data, and I'll go ahead and also just give a few numbers, and recognize that when we say the Green Bay area, that includes Appleton and Oshkosh. So let me just give you a few of those numbers, and then if we don't get to, if I haven't answered all the questions, just again, just sort of point us to the additional information you're looking for. The trip report finds that in the Green Bay area, the average cost annually to motorists is $1,596 in the cost of driving on rough roads, which is beating up their vehicle, the cost of traffic congestion, which is largely additional delays, and finally, the economic cost of serious and fatal traffic crashes, in which the lack of adequate roadway safety features were a contributing factor. The report finds that in the Green Bay area, 43% of the region's major roads have pavement in poor condition, and 24% are rated in mediocre condition. The TRIP report finds that in the Green Bay area, 4% of the region's bridges are rated in poor condition and 41% are rated in fair condition. The TRIP report also found that in the Green Bay area annually over the last 5 years, there have been 40 people killed in traffic crashes, including motorists, pedestrian, and bicyclists. So if you look at that, we go back to, on the congestion front, in terms of looking at the types of improvements that will be most effective, and that includes adding capacity, making the existing system more efficient. And also, so all of those strategies come to bear, and to a large extent, they are really based on the particular situations of that urban area. So, you'd mentioned additional transportation improvements coming to the Green Bay area. And I would anticipate that the regional governments, as well as the state transportation department, are evaluating which of those improvements will be most effective. And the challenge really for all transportation agencies with limited funding, again, is evaluating which of those transportation improvements will be the most effective in improving the reliability of the system. And the reliability is obviously for the public, people that are traveling in the region, but also for the movement of freight in and out of the region. Now, I know you had multiple questions, so if there's something that we missed there, just feel free to, follow up.
Yeah, my only other question quick too would just be, again, talking about the funding, and I think some people hear that at home and they kind of think, well, how can I really make a difference or have an impact in that way? We always tell our viewers, reach out to your senator or your legislator to, let them know what your thoughts are if this is important to you. But is there any other, I guess, real actionable way to encourage or have our viewers, I guess, somehow have more of a stance or to do something about it when the roads are, hearing 43%, and I think you had said 25% in some other areas. I was a little embarrassed to hear that they're even worse in our area. So is there anything that our viewers can actually do on a personal level?
Well, certainly, particularly when you look at safety, there's a lot that the public can do in terms of making sure that they're as safe as possible as a motorist, but also as a pedestrian and bicyclist for that matter. In terms of the condition of the system and traffic congestion, obviously, driving carefully, making sure that they're maintaining their vehicle are also very helpful. But ultimately, the improvements that every region needs in their transportation system are coming largely through public agencies at the federal, state, and also local level. And ultimately, elected officials are responsive to the needs of the people in their communities. So it is very important that the public let their elected officials know the importance of the transportation system to their quality of life. Tracy and Nick, I don't know if you want to add to that from a local perspective.
No, absolutely. It's very important. And when legislators prioritize that, they are prioritizing really their constituents and businesses and promoting economic development. And so I think it is one of the top issues that we need to be looking at, and to understand that if we take care of it now, it will lead to less issues in the future. So every time you kick the can down the road, inflation and costs just get more and more expensive. So let's create a sustainable funding solution and let's prioritize and all get on the same page.
Thank
I
you.
see, another question from Tom Keenan. Tom, I'll promote you to a panelist and you should be able to ask your question. Oh, actually, I'll read Tom's question which he had submitted earlier. So I asked, is there any indication that Wisconsin DOT or any other state DOT is preparing for the extreme axle weights of electric vehicles and the damage that they'll do to rural roads?
I still think that data, I've seen some research trying to look at the impact on heavier vehicles. Preliminary seems to suggest that larger commercial trucks, if they were significantly heavy, although there are weight limits on those vehicles, potentially could have more impact. The information is not as clear on what would be the impact of passenger vehicles being heavier. So I think the reality is that we are likely going to see a significant increase in the use of electric vehicles. And so certainly additional analysis and research need to be done to look at long-term what will be the implications for maintaining the system.
Right, I have another question from McLeod Hagman. McLeod, I've tried to promote you to a panelist, but if you're not able to join, oh, there we go. So if you unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
Sure. Good morning. Yeah, thank you so much. I was just curious how Wisconsin compares nationally to a lot of those other states as well. And I'm also curious how Wisconsin compares to some of our neighboring states like Michigan and Illinois.
If you look at the data in terms of bridge conditions, the state is really right at the national average, with 7% of its bridges in poor condition. I don't, off the top of my head, have the data for all of the surrounding states. We could certainly look that up for you subsequently, after this call. In terms of pavement conditions, Wisconsin's urban roads continue to be unfortunately above the national average in terms of the share of its roads in rough condition. And understand that's a roughness index that essentially the monitors are run across the road surfaces, and the more the vibrations are, that means the rougher the ride is. It certainly correlates to overall pavement conditions, but as a transportation agency will point out, it's not the same evaluation of actually measuring substructure quality and more of an engineering analysis, but very critical because the consumer ultimately cares about the condition of the system. In terms of traffic safety, the fatality rate in Wisconsin has been historically lower than the national average, and certainly that's a positive. But at the end of the day, we're talking about 600 people annually being killed in Wisconsin in traffic crashes. Maybe Nick can maybe add a comment to that. AAA represents motorists. Really, from AAA's perspective, when you look at Wisconsin with a somewhat better fatality rate, but how does that fit in with the overall concern in terms of traffic safety for the public?
Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin doesn't particularly stand out one way or another in terms of the national averages. I think we're right on par with most other states, both in the region and across the country, seeing those same trends over the last couple of years with a steep escalation in fatalities during the pandemic, and then kind of slowly coming back down, still not back to pre-pandemic levels. And some different challenges, whereas we're seeing more of a shift in the fatalities, shifting more towards the urban areas and being more bike and pedestrian fatalities, other roadway users than dominated by highway fatalities. So I think there's still a lot of work to do, but I think there this is all connected in terms of the state implementing its Safe Highway program, the city of Milwaukee implementing its Vision Zero program. That all requires funding, and there is that infrastructure component to those safety strategies that is really important, but it does cost money and does require an investment.
And McLeod, thank you, Nick. If you email myself and Carolyn with any surrounding states, we'd be happy to look up those numbers for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
I believe that covers all of the questions that have come in and the hands that were raised. If there are subsequent questions, you can contact Rocky or myself, and we can try to answer those, or we can put you in touch with Tracy and Nick if your questions are better directed to them. So Rocky, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, well, again, I really want to thank Nick and Tracy for taking some time to give a statewide regional perspective, if you will, on our report. And again, for all the journalists who tuned in, ultimately, the power of our report is the ability to communicate this to the public. So we certainly appreciate your interest, and again, we're available for calls throughout the day. And thanks everyone for attending today's webinar.